on our show, we pride ourselves on being one of the only shows out there that gets, I mean, we'll have people from the established right, from the Trump right, all the way over to the, considered left. We've actually had a couple of woke people on, but for the most part, I stay away from the wokesters. But last week we were talking to Brianna Joy Gray, who she calls herself a libertarian socialist. She's a Bernie gal. She worked on his campaign, very thoughtful, great gal. But she was making the point, we had an argument over COVID and the restrictions and the kids. And I was saying they've done their part. It's enough on the children with the masking and all the nonsense. Yeah. And she said, no, she said, don't you understand? They need to sacrifice for the good of the community. It's for the good of the community. And I kind of told her, look, I'm done. The children are done for the good of the community. Like we want to do good of the community. You could do that from any angle. Why don't you sacrifice for the good of my children? Why don't the old people say, I'm going to sacrifice, I'll take a risk so that your children can have a normal life? That kind of thinking spins us into places I certainly don't want to go.
No, and one of the stark realities of COVID and the reaction and the response is that children, and by that I'm old enough where I'll say anybody under 30 is a child, and certainly anybody under 20, right, or 21. They have borne in many ways the toughest price. They have had their lives and their views just massively disrupted, and it's not clear when that's going to end. I mean, places like Flint, Michigan, are still saying we're going to do online schooling indefinitely and things like that. And these are the people who are the least likely to be harmed by COVID or to, anything. And we were making them pay the biggest price. I don't know how that's going to play out down the road. I look at those pictures. There was a famous shot that got widely circulated of a marching band or a school band in Washington State where schools had reopened, and it was kids, in the brass section in these plastic zippered bubbles playing, the trumpet and the saxophone. And it's like, wow, man, we have really screwed up. I started one of the first big stories. I've been at Reason forever since 1993. The magazine itself's been around since 68. Yeah. But I wrote a story about that was in 1997 or 98 called Childproofing the World. And I was saying, on every level, kids in America were doing better than ever, but we were talking about them as if they were living in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. It's just this horrifying world where they were going to be made mentally ill by heading soccer balls or eating too many hot dogs, or they were going to be abducted on the street. I mean, it was insanity. And we are still in that world. Like we're literally in some places putting kids in, zippered up bubbles, supposedly to protect them from a disease that is dangerous, but is not going to harm them in any meaningful way. I mean, we have it so backwards. And again, this is, for me, politics, when it comes down to COVID, there's a period where, people didn't know very much what was going on. We have a good sense of that. We have vaccines. What should be done now is, people can take their own risk level and act accordingly. If you don't want to go to a business that doesn't, require masking or vaccine mandates, then don't go there. If you don't want to get vaccinated, and I think if you don't want to get vaccinated, you're, and you're not immunocompromised or something, you're wrong. You're stupid. You're taking a chance that you shouldn't be doing. That's not true.
What if you have natural immunity?
No, well, you know what? I've had COVID twice and I have 3 vaccines. So, but what I'm saying is the point isn't that my decision shouldn't be the thing that rules your life. Yeah. We can devolve risk-taking and risk assessment down to the individual level and then let people live the way they want to. And that is a better world, even if it means, my preference is not always going to be, followed. But that's what a free society is, where you let
Nick, you tell it to this girl. Tell it to this girl, because this past weekend in D.C., they had a march in favor of freedom and against the mandates. And there were some 50,000 people reportedly who showed up to say we're anti-mandate. A lot of these people are pro-vaccine. They're anti-mandate.
Some of them are, some of them are not. And I consider myself, I'm anti-mandate, I'm pro-vaccine. I watched a bunch of footage from that, and there's people like Robert Kennedy Jr., who has been anti-vaccine. He wrote a discredited and ultimately pulled story from Rolling Stone years ago about how MMR vaccines caused autism, which was based on false research.
I agree with that. And we've done a lot of reporting on that too. But I will say, it was a fascinating profile by him. in Rolling Stone just this past weekend by Rolling Stone. It was, I think it was in Rolling Stone. It was in Spin. It was in Spin. Anyway, he in that he says he's not anti-vaccine, and I guess has moderated some of his MMR vaccine views.
Well,
the
in
problem
any
is
case,
his original stance undermines his criticism of the current vaccines, because we're all like, you hated even the good ones. You know, like this is a good one too, but like more controversial because it's more recent.
No, and also, let's not talk about him or any kind of anti-vax person either. A big problem right now is that, and this is also something I read a lot about, the loss of trust and confidence in major institutions, particularly government, but also the private sector and also in philanthropy, things like the Catholic Church. The handling of the knowledge of what was going on about COVID and how to deal with it coming out of people like Anthony Fauci, the CDC, and the FDA has been terrible. And they really have done such a disservice by not being square with people, not being honest with people, and, kind of pursuing a noble lie strategy where, Fauci and other people would say, like masks are useless, don't wear masks. And then they, admit later, oh, well, we didn't want people to buy personal, PPE because we might have needed it for other people. We learn now that there was a stockpile of N95 masks that the government was holding on to until recently. And it's kind of like, wasn't this the emergency that you pull out all the stops, the CDC and the FDA, especially when it came to kind of really fast tracking vaccines? They put the vaccines into one process, but they still took their time to kind of really hustle through all of the safety requirements and everything. Well, it's amazing to me.
Once they got there, they really hit their stride. Yeah. Wait, let me finish the point I was trying to make about the rally in Washington this weekend. So they show up there, and what do they want? They're not saying no one should take the vaccine, whether you have RFK Jr. there or not. That's not what the message was. The message was pro-freedom and to get government off our backs and to get rid of these mandates. And they had firefighters who'd been fired, the heroes a year ago, now fired because they wouldn't take the vaccine, and medical workers, same deal. And look at this lunatic from, I guess I'm just assuming she's from the left. She's definitely a Trump hater. Listen to how she viewed the people there, firefighters, nurses, and so on, pushing that message. Watch.
Wow. Yeah, I think I'd double the Xanax. I'd double the Xanax on her prescription.